When my husband said we needed to rent a small apartment to save on bills, I believed him. We'd been together for 8 years through layoffs, miscarriages, and the slow grind of building a life from nothing. So when he told me it was just a temporary solution, a smaller place to stay while we figured things out, I didn't question it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in us. He found the apartment himself, of course. Said it was near his office, convenient, quiet, and just the right size for a couple who'd gotten too used to living beyond their means. I remember the way he said it, smiling as if he were proud of being practical. "You'll love it," he said. "It's simple, but it's ours." The first time I stepped inside, it did feel cozy. 2 rooms, a narrow kitchen, sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains. The place smelled faintly of cedar, like the previous tenant had burned incense to cover something up. There was a small balcony facing a row of maple trees that had just begun to turn red for the fall. It was the kind of place that made you want to light a candle and start over. For the first week, I tried to make it feel like home. I hung our wedding photo above the sofa, placed a vase of fresh lilies on the table, and cooked his favorite meal, spaghetti with too much garlic, the way he liked it. But he was never really there. He always had a late shift, a meeting, or traffic. When he did come, it was late at night, tired, quiet, and carrying the scent of someone else's perfume, a faint sweetness I tried to convince myself was from the office. I told myself marriage was about trust, about patience. We'd had rough patches before. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was the one pulling away. But something about that apartment never sat right with me. There was a second set of keys I'd never seen before, sitting on the kitchen counter the first day I moved in. When I asked about them, he said, "Oh, those are for maintenance." Then he pocketed them so quickly it almost looked rehearsed. There was also the coded lock on the hallway closet. It was odd, what kind of landlord installs a keypad lock on a storage closet? When I asked, my husband shrugged it off, said it was broken and that he'd talk to the owner. He never did. At night, I sometimes heard faint buzzing like a mechanical hum coming from that locked space. The sound was irregular, almost like a timer. Once, I tried to peek underneath, but the gap was too small to see through. Still, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the man I'd built my life around wasn't hiding something as cruel as infidelity. But the lies always start small. One evening, while cleaning the living room, I knocked over a small decorative bowl on the shelf. Inside was a receipt from a nearby boutique, a place I'd never been. It was for a silk robe, size small, rose gold. I don't wear rose gold. I never have. I remember staring at the receipt, my fingers trembling, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a gift for me. Maybe he'd forgotten to give it. Maybe he'd bought it for his mother. But deep down, I knew. That night, he didn't come home until past midnight. I waited up, pretending to read. He walked in with that same faint perfume clinging to him. Sweet, floral, unfamiliar. "Where were you?" I asked softly, trying not to sound like I was accusing him. "Working late," he said without looking at me. He placed his phone face down on the table, always face down. I wanted to reach across the table, grab that phone, and see the truth for myself, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I smiled. "You smell nice," I said. He froze for just a second, then laughed it off. "Oh yeah, the office cleaner sprayed something new today. It's everywhere." I nodded, but my chest burned. The next morning, I decided to test something. I left a tiny piece of masking tape across the closet keypad, small enough that he wouldn't notice, but just enough that if anyone opened it, the tape would tear. That evening, when he came home, I watched him carefully. He avoided looking at the closet, ate quickly, showered, slept. But when he left for work the next morning, I walked straight to the closet. The tape was gone. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the torn ends stuck to the wall. I felt the air in that little apartment change, thick, heavy, full of something I couldn't yet name. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing faint footsteps above the hum. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I was afraid of what it would mean if I was right. The next day, while cleaning, I found another clue, a small metallic lens tucked behind a picture frame on the bookshelf. A hidden camera. Its little red light was blinking. My stomach turned cold. I picked it up with trembling hands, unplugged it, and stared at it as if it were some strange creature. My mind spun. Had he been recording me? Or someone else? I sat down on the couch and stared around the apartment. It suddenly felt smaller, unfamiliar, like I was sitting inside a stranger's home. Then, a thought came to me, an awful, daring thought. If this place wasn't meant for us, then who was it meant for? And if it wasn't for us, maybe I could pretend it was. I decided I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. I'd wait. I'd play my role. I'd keep my voice calm, my gestures soft. And I'd find the truth, inch by inch. The next few days became a quiet investigation. When he said he'd be late, I stayed. When he said I should visit my sister for the weekend, I refused. I could feel him growing uneasy, his messages shorter, his calls less frequent. Then, on the fifth night, he came home looking nervous. He avoided eye contact, went straight to the closet, and stood there a moment too long. When he turned, his smile was tight, rehearsed. "You sure you're okay staying here?" he asked suddenly. "Why wouldn't I be?" I said, pretending to be confused. He hesitated. "No reason." I watched him that night as he slept. The man beside me, his breathing slow, his arm draped across me like always. But now I saw him differently. Every touch, every word felt like a lie rehearsed to keep me docile. The next morning, I decided to open that closet. I waited until he left for work, then retrieved the spare screwdriver from the drawer. The keypad was newer than I expected, and the screws were hidden beneath the frame. It took nearly 20 minutes of prying, my hands shaking the whole time, before the frame finally came loose. Inside wasn't a storage space. It was another door, a smaller one painted white, with a faint scent of jasmine wafting from the gap beneath it. My stomach dropped. I turned the handle. It opened, and behind it was a staircase leading down. I remember standing there, frozen, staring into that narrow staircase as if it were breathing. It descended steeply into darkness, a faint yellow glow flickering from somewhere below. My first instinct was to close the door and pretend I'd never seen it. Pretend that maybe it led to a basement, a maintenance room, anything ordinary. But that smell of jasmine, it was too familiar now. It clung to his shirts, his hair, the pillow. He turned away from me. I took one slow step down. The wood creaked beneath my feet. Another step, and another, until the door behind me clicked shut on its own. My breath echoed softly in the tight space. I could hear the faint hum again, louder now. When I reached the bottom, my hand found a switch. I hesitated before flicking it on. The light revealed a small, perfectly furnished room. A couch in soft beige, a low coffee table with a bowl of potpourri, and on the wall a painting I'd once admired in a gallery, one I knew we could never afford. I stared at it, my pulse roaring in my ears. Everything about this space screamed intention. The walls were freshly painted, the floor spotless, the scent stronger now, floral, expensive. There was a second door. I opened it slowly and stepped into a bedroom. The bed was neatly made. A silk robe rose gold lay folded on the edge, just like the receipt I'd found days ago. On the dresser, there was a small mirror and a brush, strands of long dark hair caught between its bristles. I don't have long hair. For a moment, I thought I might be sick. The room seemed to tilt. I reached for the dresser to steady myself, my fingers brushing against a phone charger, a bottle of perfume, a small silver bracelet. Everything so lived in. And then I saw the framed photo on the bedside table. Him, smiling, holding a woman I'd never met, her head on his shoulder. My husband, in a place that wasn't ours, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. My chest went cold. My legs felt heavy. I sank down on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo until my vision blurred. My husband, the man who once said I was his home, had built another home, right beneath mine. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat there in silence, the kind that hums through your bones when the world stops making sense. Eventually, I stood up and began to look around, not as a wife anymore, but as someone gathering evidence. There were receipts tucked in a drawer, wine glasses on the counter, a small stack of love notes written in looping handwriting that wasn't mine. I picked one up. "You make me feel safe here." Safe. The words stung more than any curse could have. I put the letter back, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned off the light. Then I climbed back up the stairs, shut the hidden door, and stared at the keypad. I pressed my palm against it, memorizing its cold surface. Then I whispered to myself, "Not yet." For the next 3 days, I acted like nothing had changed. I smiled at him when he came home, cooked his dinner, kissed his cheek, asked about his meetings. He looked relieved, even affectionate, believing whatever tension had been between us was gone. But inside me, something had snapped, not with rage, not with heartbreak, but with clarity. I knew I couldn't simply confront him. Words wouldn't be enough. He would lie, deflect, charm his way out like he always did. I needed truth so undeniable it would speak for itself. So I made a plan. The next morning, I packed a small overnight bag and told him I was visiting my sister for a week. He smiled too quickly and said, "That's great. You deserve a break." But I didn't go to my sister's. I went back to that apartment and moved into her space, the secret apartment beneath mine. I cleaned the counter, made the bed, set my phone to record, and waited. I wanted to see him the way she did, to know the version of him that existed when I wasn't around. The air felt heavier down there, like it held all the words they'd whispered. The first day it was silent. He didn't come. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Every sound from upstairs amplified the creak of pipes, the thud of doors. On the second night, I heard footsteps. The lock beeped. My heart nearly stopped. I slipped into the bathroom and shut the door just enough to see through the crack. He walked in with a woman, the same one from the photo. Her laugh was soft, familiar, like the hum I'd heard in the walls. She placed her purse on the counter and turned toward him. "Did she suspect anything?" she asked. He chuckled. "No, she's too busy pretending everything's fine." I felt something inside me break quietly. He poured her wine, kissed her forehead, and led her toward the bed, the same bed I had sat on days ago, staring at their picture. I forced myself not to move, not to make a sound. I just listened. The small talk, the laughter, the sighs, all of it burned into me, not as rage, but as proof. When they finally left hours later, I waited. My legs were numb, my hands trembling. I walked out, turned off the lights, and sat at the table with my phone still recording. That night, I made copies of everything, the receipts, the photos, the recordings, evidence, not just for revenge, but for survival. Because I knew, once I confronted him, there would be no going back. By the fourth day, I'd stopped feeling sorrow. It was something colder now, clarity mixed with exhaustion. I spent hours just sitting on that couch, wondering when exactly he stopped loving me. Was it after our second miscarriage? When I cut my hair short? When the house got too quiet? Or had he always been building this escape, brick by brick, lie by lie? The day before I left, I placed the photo of them on the nightstand again, but this time, I replaced her face with mine. A small, cruel gesture, one I didn't even fully understand, except that it made me feel present, real. When I finally walked out of that hidden room for the last time, I locked the door, reset the keypad, and kept the code to myself. That night, when he came home, he asked if I'd had a good time at my sister's. I looked at him and said, "Yes, I learned a lot." He smiled. "About what?" I met his eyes and said quietly, "About you." He froze, searching my face for meaning, but I just smiled. "Dinner's in the oven." He sat down cautiously, like he was trying to read me. I watched him eat. The way he avoided looking at me, how he laughed too loudly when I told him about a story that didn't exist. He was nervous, and I wanted him to be, because he didn't know that underneath our feet was a secret I'd already buried him in. The next morning, the weight of what I knew pressed on me like a stone on my chest. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the hiss of the kettle, the scrape of his chair, the whisper of his phone screen lighting up when he thought I wasn't watching. I couldn't unsee it now. The other life he built under ours, the apartment meant for her. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone into the sink and demand to know why. But I didn't. I just kept watching, listening, because I knew the real power wasn't in the confrontation, it was in the truth being undeniable. So, I waited until the weekend. That Saturday morning, I made him breakfast. His favorite eggs over easy, toast just slightly burnt, coffee black. He smiled when he sat down, scrolling through his phone like any other day. I remember my voice being calm when I said, "I found your little secret." He looked up, confused at first, then wary. "What are you talking about?" I tilted my head. "The apartment." He froze mid-bite. His eyes darted, looking for some kind of escape, like maybe if he stayed still long enough, I'd take it back. "What apartment?" he said, his voice forced steady. "The one under ours," I said softly. "The one you built for her." For a second, he said nothing. Then he laughed, a nervous, hollow sound. "You're imagining things, Sarah." But I didn't argue. I just slid my phone across the table. The screen lit up, and the first video started to play. His voice, her laugh, the sound of them together. His face drained of color. He tried to reach for the phone, but I stopped him with one hand. "Don't," I said quietly. "You'll want to hear it all." He stood up, pacing. You went through my things? You spied on me? I smiled faintly. No, I moved into the place you built for her. For a week. That broke him. His face twisted, not in guilt but in anger. You had no right. I had every right. I cut in. That's my home. You built it with our money. You told me it was a rental to help with bills, remember? Every part of this marriage was built on lies, and I just decided to see where they led. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The silence between us felt endless. When he finally spoke, his tone was bitter, defensive. You don't understand. Things haven't been right between us for a long time. I didn't know how to tell you. I nodded slowly. So you told her instead. He rubbed his face, pacing like a caged animal. It wasn't supposed to go that far. It was something I needed, a distraction. From what? I asked. From your vows? From me losing our baby? From the fact that you stopped being the man you pretended to be? He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him whole. For the first time, I realized I didn't need his apology. I didn't even want it. What I wanted was to be done pretending that his betrayal was something I had to carry quietly. That afternoon, I went to my friend Claire's place. She's a lawyer, someone I'd known since college, someone who'd seen me through every heartbreak. When I told her everything, she didn't pity me. She just nodded and said, "We'll make this clean." She helped me draft the papers, gather the evidence, and prepare for the conversation I knew was coming. Not just with him but with the people who thought we were perfect. By Monday, everyone knew. Not because I shouted it, but because I sent one simple email to his company's HR department, where he'd listed the spare apartment as a secondary residence for tax purposes. I attached the recordings, the photos, the receipts. No drama, just truth. The fallout was immediate. He was suspended pending review. The woman, his mistress, turned out to be a junior employee. The story spread quietly, then loudly. Neighbors whispered. Friends texted awkward condolences. He tried to call me. He tried to explain. I didn't answer. A week later, I went back to the apartment. Not ours, the hidden one. It was empty now. The scent of jasmine had faded, replaced by dust and silence. The place looked smaller somehow, almost pathetic. I stood there in the center of the room, holding the keys, and realized how much of myself I'd given to someone who built entire walls to keep me out. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I just took one last look around, then placed the keys on the counter and walked out. Outside, the air was crisp. The world felt wide again. The divorce went through 3 months later. He didn't fight it. Maybe because he knew there was nothing left to defend. I got the house, the savings, and something far more valuable, my peace. But even after all that, the strangest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how quiet it ended. No shouting, no dramatic goodbye, just silence like a door finally closing. And yet, every now and then, I catch a faint trace of jasmine somewhere, a stranger's perfume, a memory in passing, and it reminds me of what I survived. I don't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. What I feel now is distance, the kind that makes you grateful for every painful truth that set you free. Because the truth is, I didn't lose him. I just found myself in the ruins of what he built. When people hear my story now, they always ask the same question. Why didn't I just leave the moment I found out? And every time, I tell them this because leaving is easy when you have nothing to lose. But when you've built a life around someone's promises, you don't just walk away. You peel yourself away piece by piece until you can finally see where you end and they begin. For years, I thought love meant loyalty at all costs. That if I stayed kind enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, things would go back to how they were. But I learned that love without respect is just submission dressed up as devotion. I stayed that week, not out of weakness, but clarity. I needed to see it, feel it, and know it for myself. Because sometimes, when someone betrays you so deeply, words aren't enough. You need the evidence to believe your own pain. And when I finally walked away, I did it knowing I had faced every part of it head on. No doubts, no unfinished questions, just truth. There were quiet nights afterward when I'd sit by the window, the one that looked over the city we were supposed to grow old in, and wonder how two people who once promised forever could become strangers so quickly. The bed felt too big, the silence too sharp. But with time, the loneliness softened. I started sleeping better, eating better, breathing better. The simple things, morning light on my face, the sound of rain against the kitchen window, started feeling sacred again. One morning, I went back to painting. I hadn't picked up a brush in years. He always said it was a hobby that didn't pay, but that morning, I painted something that felt like freedom, a small apartment window, open, with sunlight spilling through. It wasn't revenge that healed me. It was remembering that I had a self before him and that she deserved to be seen again. So if you're listening to this, and you're sitting in a silence that feels too heavy, I want you to know something. You don't have to prove your worth by surviving someone else's cruelty. You don't have to be the understanding one. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away without setting anything on fire, just closing the door, quietly, knowing you never have to knock again. Because peace doesn't come when the pain stops. It comes when you stop chasing what caused it. And if you ever find yourself standing in a room that wasn't meant for you, a room built on lies, don't wait to be invited out. Leave on your own terms. Walk out into the light, and never look back. You know, I used to think betrayal was the end of love, but now, I see it differently. Sometimes it's just the beginning of understanding, not of them, but of yourself. I learned that pain doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. It strips away everything false, until all that's left is who you really are when no one's watching. And for the first time in a long time, I like the woman I see in the mirror. She's not naive anymore. She's not quiet to keep the peace. She's not waiting for an apology that will never come. She's free. If my story sounds familiar, if you've ever loved someone who made you question your own sanity, I hope you remember this. You're not crazy for wanting answers. You're not dramatic for demanding respect. And you are not broken for walking away. Some betrayals aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to set you free. Tell me, would you have done what I did, stayed for a week to find the truth, or would you have walked away the moment you knew? And do you think forgiveness is strength or surrender? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because every story shared here helps another woman remember she's not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, take care of your heart. It's the only home that can't be taken from you.